The document that destroyed my family wasn't hidden. It was sitting on a table in a bank manager's office on a Tuesday morning, printed on plain paper, 3 pages long, with my name at the top and my signature at the bottom. The problem was that I had never signed it. I know what my own handwriting looks like after 34 years. I know the way my letters crowd at the end of my name, like they're trying to catch something. The signature on that page was clean, patient. It sat perfectly still. Mine never does. My name is Vivian Marsh. I'm a certified fraud examiner. I have spent 11 years finding money that people thought they'd hidden from me. I follow financial trails through shell companies, altered records, and documents designed to look older than they are. I had no idea my next case would be my own family, but I should have. Because the warning was there, 6 weeks before the bank called. I just wasn't looking at my own life the way I look at files. Let me show you exactly what I missed, and what I didn't. My grandfather built his life out of patience, Ira. Marsh never made one dramatic move in his entire life. He didn't retire from the post office. He just stopped going in one day and nobody argued. He didn't sell his farmland in a negotiation. He decided on a number, wrote it on a notepad, slid it across a diner table, and waited until the buyer got tired of waiting. He waited out everything. That was his method. Time, he believed, always settled things more cleanly than arguments. When Ira died, he left me $480,000 in a trust that he'd been quietly building for 22 years. He didn't tell my father. He didn't tell my aunts. He told me, once, in a parking lot outside his cardiologist's office when I was 26, that the money was there and that I'd know when I needed it. I asked him why me. He looked out the windshield for a while, and then he said, I gave the others things they asked for. I gave you the thing I decided you deserved. There's a difference. I didn't fully understand what he meant until I was sitting in a bank manager's office with a forged power of attorney in front of me, trying to understand how my family had gotten there first. 6 weeks before the bank called, my cousin Delia came to visit. I should say, Delia doesn't visit. We see each other at holidays and funerals, and we like each other fine, and we don't seek each other out. So when she showed up at my apartment on a Wednesday evening with wine and an energy I didn't recognize, I noticed. She asked about work. She asked about my apartment. And then, at the exact moment the conversation felt most casual, she asked whether I kept all my financial stuff in one bank or whether I spread it around. Just curious, she said. I've been thinking about consolidating mine. I told her something vague. I watched her file it. After she left, I sat with the feeling that the visit had had a purpose I hadn't caught. It's an occupational hazard. I notice when a conversation is shaped. I made a note to change my account, passwords, and add 2-factor authentication to everything. Then a work deadline swallowed the next 2 weeks whole, and I didn't do it. That gap, 10 days between noticing something was wrong and doing something about it, is the only thing I'd go back and change. Everything else I'd keep exactly as it happened. The bank called at 8:14 on a Tuesday morning. A fraud alert on my account. Would I come in? The branch manager's name was Thomas, and he had the careful face of a man who had delivered bad news before and hadn't yet figured out a way to make it easier. He showed me the power of attorney. It was a 3-page document granting my Uncle Raymond full authority over my accounts, including the trust, in the event that I was unable to manage my affairs due to stress, grief, or cognitive incapacity. There was a doctor's note attached, a general practitioner I'd seen twice in my life, for a sinus infection and a sprained ankle. The note said I had been showing signs of complicated grief and impaired financial judgment following my grandfather's death. I read it twice. Then I looked at Thomas. When was this submitted? I asked. 5 days ago, he said. And what date does the document itself carry? He looked at the page. 7 weeks ago, I asked him to print the file's digital properties and the metadata. The actual creation record embedded in the document itself, the timestamp that gets generated automatically the moment a file is born on a computer. He printed it, the document, according to its own bones, was 5 days old, not 7 weeks. 5 days. Someone had typed a date onto a page and assumed the page would keep their secret. It doesn't work that way. I drove to my Uncle Raymond's house directly, from the bank. I want to be honest about what I felt in the car. Not rage, not grief. A very specific, very cold clarity that I recognize from work. The feeling that arrives when a case stops being complicated and starts being simple. When the shape of the whole thing becomes visible at once. Raymond opened the door in a cardigan, looking unsurprised. Which was itself a data point. I told him I'd been to the bank. I told him about the document. I watched his face cycle through 3 expressions in about 4 seconds. Calculation, concern, and then the one I'd been waiting for. Pity. "Vivian," he said, "nobody is trying to hurt you. We're worried about you. After Ira died, you isolated. You stopped returning calls. Your father and I, we thought if we had some visibility into the trust, we could make sure it was being looked after properly." I noted the word visibility. I noted the phrase looked after. I asked him who had signed the doctor's note. He said Dr. Harmon had been very understanding. I asked him whether Dr. Harmon was aware that the document was dated 7 weeks ago when it had been created 5 days ago. Raymond's expression did. "Something I've seen in interview rooms. It recalculated. That's just an error," he said. "A paperwork error." I told him paperwork errors were my specialty. Then I told him I'd see him soon and I left. On the drive home, I thought about Delia's visit. About the wine and the practiced casualness and the question about which bank I used. She had been sent to confirm the account location before they filed. They needed to know they had the right institution. Delia, who I liked fine and never sought out. Who had been used as a surveying tool by her father without, I hoped, fully understanding what she was walking into. I thought about my grandfather in that parking lot. "I gave you the thing I decided you deserved." Ira had known his own family. Here's what they had built. By the time I started pulling threads, my Uncle Raymond, Ira's son, who had expected the trust and hadn't gotten it, had spent 6 months constructing a case that I was incapacitated. He had cultivated Dr. Harmon, who was either negligent or complicit. He had recruited Delia as an unwitting advance scout. He had found a notary named Greg Fells, who had stamped a document on a day it hadn't been signed, and he had pulled in my father, my quiet, conflict-averse father who lived 3 states away and owed Raymond a favor from a business arrangement years ago. My father, who had co-signed the power of attorney without, I think, fully understanding what he was doing, or who had understood and been too afraid of Raymond to say no. The architecture of it was not amateur. Raymond worked in commercial real estate. He moved documents for a living, but he had made the same mistake. Every person I've ever investigated makes he had changed the date on the page. He hadn't changed. The date inside it. I'm going to tell you something about digital documents that most people don't know, because Raymond didn't know it. And it's the thing that ended this. Every file created on a computer carries a timestamp in its structure, not on its face, not where you can see it in the document itself, but in its metadata. The date and time it was born, the date and time it was last saved, the software that made it, sometimes the username of the person who made it. You can type any date you want on the face of a document. You cannot change what the file remembers about itself. The power of attorney said 7 weeks. The file said 5 days. Those 2 facts cannot both be true, and only one of them came from a machine that doesn't have any reason to lie. The notary stamp said Greg Fells had witnessed my signature on the earlier date, 7 weeks back, so I looked up Greg. Fells.notary commissions are public record. You can search them. I did. Greg Fells had held a commission. Past tense. His license had expired 4 months earlier with no renewal on file. On the day he claimed to have notarized my signature, Greg Fells had no legal authority to notarize anything. His stamp was theater. His journal entry, which he had carefully written in, was a man performing a memory he didn't have. And when I pulled his journal through the investigator, the bank assigned, the entry numbers around my record didn't follow sequence. There was a skip. The kind of skip that happens when a line gets written in after the fact, inserted between 2 entries that had already moved on. A liar forgets that numbers have neighbors. I did not call Raymond. I did not call my father. I spent 3 days assembling the file the way I'd assemble any file, quietly, in order, twice. The metadata printout, the state record of Fell's expired commission, the journal page with the circled sequence break, the real trust document, naming me and only me, untouchable by any power of attorney, whether forged or not. I gave a copy to the bank's fraud investigator, a careful woman named Dasha, who said very little and wrote a great deal. I gave a copy to the attorney who had drafted my grandfather's trust, a man named Peter Cole who had known Ira for 30 years and who, when I read him the power of attorney over the phone, made a sound like he'd just found something in a drawer he hadn't expected. Even a real power of attorney can't touch a trust structured this way, he said. Your grandfather made sure of that. This was never going to give them the money. I sat with that for a moment. Then why do it? I asked. Peter was quiet. Because they needed you scared, he said. A frightened person signs things. The fear part had almost worked. The week between filing the fraud report and hearing back from Dasha was the worst one. Raymond had responded to my bank visit by accelerating. He'd begun calling extended family with a version of events in which I was unwell and irrational, and had filed a complaint against my own family out of paranoia. Delia called me, genuinely upset, saying she hadn't known what her father was planning. I believed her. She had been a piece moved on a board she couldn't see. My father called once and said my name and then stopped, like a man who had prepared a speech and forgotten he didn't believe it anymore. I didn't ask him to choose. That felt like the cruelest thing I could do to someone who was already lost. Raymond filed his own complaint to my professional licensing board, claiming I had used my credentials to intimidate family members. It was enough to open a review, not enough to cost me my license. But it sat there, await, while everything else moved slowly. That was the week I understood what the whole structure had been designed to do, not to steal the money outright. The trust made that nearly impossible, and Raymond probably knew it. It was designed to exhaust me, to fracture my professional reputation while the account was frozen, to surround me with family members who had been preloaded with a story about my instability, to make the cost of fighting so high, emotionally, professionally, financially, that eventually I'd sit down at some table somewhere and sign something just to make it stop. They had underestimated one thing. I do this for a living. I have sat across from people who built better lies than this, and I have waited them out. I am very patient. Ira taught me that. Peter Cole's conference room smelled like old carpet and radiator heat. Nothing like the lemon polish of family dinners. That difference, I realized, was the point. I had asked him to send the invitations on his letterhead, formal, specific, unmistakable in their implication. When a lawyer summons you, you don't come performing confidence. You come calculating risk. Raymond came anyway, and he walked in performing confidence, which told me he hadn't yet understood what the room was for. Dasha came from the bank with the native file on a laptop. Peter sat at the head. I sat to his left with a manila folder closed in, front of me. My father came in last and sat as far from Raymond as the table allowed, which was the most information he'd offered me in 6 weeks. I let Raymond talk first, because he wanted to, and because the story a person tells in their opening moment reveals what they think the audience doesn't know yet. He said this was a family matter. He said I had always had difficulty accepting help. He said my grandfather, God rest him, would have wanted us to take care of each other. I let him finish. Then I opened the folder. I turned the first page toward the room, and I kept my voice exactly level. The same voice I use when I read findings to a board of directors. The one that says I am not asking you to feel something. I am asking you to see something. This is the document submitted to my bank, I said. It carries a date 7 weeks ago. I turned the second page. This is what that document's own file structure says about when it was created. 5 days before my account was frozen. First and only version ever logged by the bank's system. I let that breathe. And this, I said, placing the third page where everyone could read it, is the Secretary of State's record of Greg Fells's notary commission, expired 4 months before the date on which he claims to have witnessed my signature. I turned the last page toward Greg Fells directly. His face had already gone gray. You cannot notarize a document with a license you no longer hold, I said. The commission record is public. The expiration date is not in dispute. The only question is what you were told when Fells agreed to stamp it anyway. Fells looked at Raymond, and Raymond, who had walked in performing confidence, looked at the table. Fells' voice, when it came, was small and fast. The voice of a man who has just decided that honesty is now his best available option. He said it was a family arrangement. He said it was already agreed to. He said it just needed to be made official. My father put both hands flat on the table and stared at them. Raymond, he said. Just the name. Nothing after it. Raymond said nothing. He had stopped performing. He was calculating. I gathered my pages back into the folder. The account restriction will be lifted once Dasha's review closes, I said. The matter of the document and the notarization has been referred to the county prosecutor. I stood up. My grandfather's trust will remain exactly as he structured it, as it was always going to. I didn't say anything dramatic. I didn't need to. The room had already done what I needed it to do. It had made visible, in front of witnesses, the exact shape of what had been attempted. Raymond started to speak. Peter cut him off gently, by setting his own folder open on the table and saying, I'd recommend you call someone before you say anything further. Here's what came after, because I know you want to know. And I think the after is more important than the moment. The bank lifted the restriction. The trust remained mine. Raymond's complaint to my licensing board was reviewed, found to have no basis, and closed. Dasha's fraud referral moved through the system slowly, the way these things do. Greg Fells lost the commission he'd already lost, plus the ability to reapply. A man's professional obituary, written by his own bad judgment. Raymond and I haven't spoken. I don't expect we will. My father called me 6 weeks later and talked for a long time about how Raymond had made it sound reasonable, and how he hadn't understood the full shape of it until the conference room, and how he was sorry in a way that had no single sentence large enough to hold it. I listened. I didn't offer absolution because it wasn't mine to give. I told him I loved him and that I needed some time, and I meant both things. Delia texted me an apology that was 3 paragraphs long and very sincere. I texted back I know, and I meant that too. 2 months later, I'm at my kitchen counter on a Tuesday morning, same time I always check my accounts, and the screen loads clean, no red line, just numbers, sitting where I put them. I thought I'd feel something larger in that moment. Triumph, maybe, or grief, or that particular exhaustion that comes after a long case finally closes. What I felt was quieter than any of that. I thought about Ira in that parking lot, telling me he'd given me the thing he decided I deserved. I understand now that what he'd given me wasn't the money. The money was almost incidental. He'd given me a test he trusted me to pass. I gave the others things they asked for, he'd said. I gave you the thing I decided you deserved. He had known his family. He had known that a sum of money, sitting unguarded and unexpected, would pull at them. He had made the trust watertight on purpose. He had put my name on it, and only my name on purpose. He had given me a locked room and trusted me to hold the key. I held it. People sometimes ask me, when they find out what I do, whether it's depressing to spend your life looking for the worst of what people do with money. I tell them the truth. It's not the worst of people. Not really. It's the most frightened of people. The ones who ran out of road and reached sideways instead of asking for help. Raymond had expected an inheritance and hadn't gotten one. My father had co-signed something he didn't fully understand. Because Raymond had asked and he didn't know how to say no to Raymond, fear made them dangerous, but fear also made them sloppy. They changed the date on the page. They forgot the date inside it. They found a notary. They forgot to check whether his license was still alive. They built a document to fool a morning. They forgot that documents remember everything. The truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to survive long enough for someone patient enough to find it. My grandfather understood that. He waited out everything. I learned it from watching him. I still think about that parking lot sometimes. The way he said it so plainly, like it was obvious. I gave you the thing I decided you deserved. I used to wonder if he meant the money. Now I think he meant the patience. Think that's what he was passing down all along. If you've ever had someone tell you that you're not thinking clearly right before they reached for something of yours, you know exactly what kind of cold that is. The documents were my proof, but the patience was my inheritance. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you're new here, and drop a comment. Did you see where the lie was going to unravel before it did?